Something about you has changed. And the strange part is, you may not even know when it happened. There was no single moment, no lightning strike, no dramatic collapse or grand announcement to the world. Just a quiet Tuesday, maybe. An ordinary morning where you noticed you didn't feel like yourself anymore. Except somehow, you felt more like yourself than you had in years. You stopped reaching for your phone the second you felt anxious. You stopped rehearsing arguments in the shower. You stopped waiting for people to notice you were hurting. Something in you got quiet. And by the seventh sign, you may finally understand why the things that once mattered so much suddenly don't feel the same anymore. Maybe you've noticed it in the smallest moments. A conversation that used to wreck your whole day now barely touches you. A person who used to control your mood with a single text message doesn't anymore. You look at old photos of yourself and feel a strange, tender distance, like you're looking at someone you used to know, someone you cared about, someone you're grateful for, but someone you are no longer. This is what real change looks like. Not fireworks, not a before and after picture, just silence where there used to be noise. You've been losing interest in things that once felt urgent. Arguments you would have fought to win, you now let go. Rooms you used to fill with your voice, you now sit quietly in, simply observing. People who once had the power to unravel you have somehow lost their grip. And maybe it scares you a little, because if you're not who you used to be, who are you becoming? You've been craving peace more than you crave being understood. You've been noticing exhaustion in places that used to feel exciting. You've been questioning relationships you never thought you'd question. Not because something dramatic happened, but because you changed, and the old shape of your life no longer fits the person standing inside it. This is not a breakdown. This is a becoming. Think of August 15th as a symbolic checkpoint, a marker on the calendar that has nothing to do with magic and everything to do with attention. A day to pause, to notice, to finally ask yourself the question you've been avoiding. Who have I been quietly turning into? Not everyone will notice the shift in you. Some people will miss you as you were, without realizing you're still here. Just lighter, just clearer, just more you than you've been in a long time. There are 7 signs that may reveal you're already becoming a different person. Let's begin with the first one, and it might be the one closest to home. There was a time you would have explained yourself until your voice went hoarse. You needed people to see your side. You needed the last word. You needed the misunderstanding fixed before you could sleep at night. And somewhere along the way, you stopped. Not because you gave up on people, but because you finally realized that not every misunderstanding is yours to repair, and not every opinion of you deserves a seat at your table. You stopped trying to win every conversation because you finally realized your peace was worth more than being right. Maybe you've noticed this in family gatherings, where you used to defend every choice you made. Maybe you've noticed it in group chats, where you used to type 3 paragraphs and now type nothing at all. Maybe you've noticed it with people who used to twist your words, and instead of correcting them, you simply let it go. This isn't apathy. This is maturity wearing a very quiet disguise. Many people experience this shift and mistake it for coldness, in themselves or in others. But there's something deeper happening here. When you stop needing to be understood by everyone, you start reserving your energy for the people who actually try to understand you. You start protecting your inner world instead of narrating it to anyone who asks. You may feel a strange kind of grief in this, a mourning for the version of you who used to fight so hard to be seen. But underneath that grief is something stronger, a steadiness, a knowing that your worth was never actually up for debate. It only felt that way because you kept handing the gavel to other people. If this resonates with you, you already know that silence, in this context, isn't surrender. It's sovereignty. But most people misunderstand this sign. They think it means you've stopped caring about connection. You haven't. You've just stopped performing for it. And that's only the beginning. Because the next sign asks something even harder of you. Not what you say, but what you're finally willing to walk away from. Think about the things that used to feel completely normal to you. The constant checking in, the late-night arguments that went nowhere, the friendships that ran entirely on drama, the routines that left you tired before the day even started. At some point, without deciding to, you started pulling away, not out of anger, out of exhaustion that finally had a name. Many people experience a season where the things they once tolerated suddenly feel unbearable, not because those things got worse, but because you stopped being willing to shrink yourself around them. This isn't about labeling people as toxic, it's about recognizing patterns, dynamics that once felt exciting because they were familiar, and familiar because they were what you grew up around or grew used to. When peace finally becomes familiar, chaos starts to feel exhausting. You might notice it in how quickly you leave a group chat that turns into gossip, in how little patience you have for conversations that go in circles, in how you no longer chase people who only show up when they need something. This can feel disorienting, because for so long, chaos felt like connection. Constant texting felt like love. Walking on eggshells felt like effort. And now that you've tasted something calmer, the old version of normal feels like static in a room that used to feel like home. You're not becoming antisocial. You're becoming discerning. Perhaps this season of your life is teaching you that peace isn't boring. It just feels unfamiliar after years of noise. And the discomfort you feel when things finally get quiet isn't a warning sign. It's an adjustment period. Your nervous system learning a new baseline. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because losing interest in old patterns often means losing interest in the people attached to them. And that's a grief nobody prepares you for. The next sign is where this discomfort becomes a decision. Keep listening. There's a moment in adulthood, often somewhere in your 30s, 40s, 50s, sometimes later, where you finally understand that your time is not renewable. You cannot get back the hours you spend on things that don't matter to you. And once you understand that in your bones, everything changes. You start saying no without over-explaining. You stop answering every message the second it arrives. You stop feeling obligated to attend every event, accept every invitation, or say yes just to avoid disappointing someone. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming intentional. For adults who have spent decades pouring into careers, families, obligations, and other people's expectations, this shift can feel almost rebellious. Like you're breaking some unspoken rule by protecting your own time. But maybe you've noticed, the people who truly matter never needed you to be endlessly available. They needed you to be present. And you can't be present when you're spread across everyone and everything. This is where boundaries stop being a buzzword and start being a practice. Not walls, but doors. Ones you now choose to open, rather than leaving permanently unlocked for anyone who wanders by. You may feel guilt at first. That's normal. Guilt often shows up right before growth, like a shadow cast by a light that's finally turning on. But guilt is not proof that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's just proof that you're doing something new. If this resonates with you, you already know the relief that comes after. The strange lightness of an evening with nothing scheduled, a phone left unanswered without anxiety, a no spoken without a paragraph of justification behind it. But there's something deeper happening here. Because becoming selective with your energy inevitably means confronting what you spent that energy on for so long, including things you can't go back and change. And that brings us to a sign that touches something much older, something that lives underneath all the others. This one is different from the rest, quieter, heavier, and maybe for you, the most important. There are versions of yourself you haven't fully forgiven. The person who stayed too long, the person who trusted the wrong people, the person who made a decision at 25 or 35 or 50 that still echoes today. The relationship that ended badly, the opportunity that slipped away, the years that felt wasted, even though nothing about them actually was. Maybe you're finally looking at the person you used to be with compassion instead of shame. This doesn't mean forgetting what happened. Healing was never about amnesia. It means remembering without allowing the memory to control the present. Looking back at your younger self, not as someone who failed you, but as someone who was doing the very best they could with the information, the wounds, and the circumstances they had at the time. Many people experience this stage as a quiet renegotiation with their own history. Not rewriting it, just finally reading it with new eyes. The friend who hurt you taught you what you'll no longer accept. The job that broke you taught you what you actually need to feel valued. The relationship that ended taught you the difference between being loved and being needed. This is not about ignoring real pain, and it's not a replacement for the support of a therapist or counselor if your past holds wounds that still need professional care. Some chapters deserve more than reflection. They deserve real help, real time, real healing with the right person beside you. But for many people, this season is simply about softening, about finally exhaling after years of holding your breath around your own story. If this resonates with you, you may have noticed you no longer flinch at old memories the way you used to. You can mention them now, even laugh sometimes at how far you've come. Perhaps this season of your life is teaching you that peace with your past isn't about deserving what happened. It's about refusing to let it write what happens next. But making peace with where you've been is only half the work. The other half is what you do next, especially with the people and things that never fully chose you back. This is where the transformation becomes uncomfortable. Because somewhere in your life, you were chasing something. A relationship that gave you crumbs and called it a meal. A friendship that only remembered you when it was convenient. A job, an opportunity, a dream that you kept reaching for long after it stopped reaching back. And maybe you're only now realizing how much of yourself you spent trying to earn something that should have simply been given. What is meant to remain in your life should not require you to destroy yourself just to keep it. There is a profound difference between persistence and desperation. Persistence says, I will keep showing up because this matters to me. Desperation says, I will keep shrinking myself because I'm afraid of losing this. For years, maybe those two things looked identical to you. Now, you're starting to tell them apart. Many people experience a painful clarity in this season, the realization that some people were never actually in your corner, they were simply standing near you. That some effort was never reciprocated, it was only tolerated. This isn't a punishment, it's information. And information, once you have it, is very hard to unknow. You may feel a wave of anger before you feel relief. Anger at the years spent proving your worth to people who never intended to see it. That anger is valid. Let it move through you. but don't let it live in you. Because on the other side of that anger is something far more valuable. The quiet, steady decision to stop auditioning for a place in someone's life. This isn't about giving up on people. It's about finally understanding that love, friendship, and opportunity were never supposed to feel like a performance you had to win. If this resonates with you, take a breath. This one is heavy. Let it settle. Because what comes next is where all of this, the boundaries, the peace, the letting go, starts to become something entirely new. There's a particular kind of quiet strength that comes from making a decision without needing 10 people to approve of it first. For a long time, maybe you didn't trust your own judgment. A bad decision, a broken relationship, a mistake you keep replaying. And somewhere in there, you started outsourcing your choices to everyone around you. What do you think I should do? Am I overreacting? Is this the right move? And slowly, without noticing, you started coming back to yourself. The awakening is not about discovering some magical version of yourself. It is about remembering that your voice matters. You start making decisions and simply trusting them. Not because you're certain they're perfect, but because you finally believe you're capable of handling whatever comes next, right or wrong. You stop needing constant reassurance. You start listening to that quiet internal compass you spent years ignoring in favor of everyone else's opinion. This is emotional independence. Not isolation, not stubbornness, just the simple, powerful understanding that you don't have to abandon yourself to make other people comfortable. Maybe you've noticed it in small ways. You order what you actually want instead of what's easiest for the group. You speak up in a meeting instead of staying silent to avoid friction. You end a conversation that isn't serving you instead of staying just to keep the peace. Many people experience this as the moment their life starts to feel like theirs again. Not because circumstances change dramatically, but because the relationship with themselves finally did. This is one of the most empowering signs of all, because it means the 6 things before it weren't random. They were building toward this. The boundaries, the letting go, the peace with your past. All of it was leading you back to the one person you can always trust to be there, yourself. And once you trust yourself again, something even bigger begins to happen. Something that ties every sign together. The 7th sign may be the one that explains everything. This is the one that stops people in their tracks. Maybe you scrolled back through old messages recently and didn't recognize the tone. Maybe you looked at a photo from a few years ago and felt a strange tenderness for that person, the way you'd feel towards someone you love, but from a distance. Maybe someone from your past reached out, expecting the version of you that used to answer immediately, apologize first, and stay far longer than you should have. And you realized, almost with surprise, that person simply isn't available anymore. You are calmer now, stronger, more selective about where your energy goes and who gets access to your heart. You explain yourself less. You forgive yourself more. You no longer chase what isn't choosing you, and you no longer doubt every decision you make. None of these changes happened overnight, but together they've quietly built someone new, or rather, someone older. Someone who was always there, underneath the noise, the fear, the approval-seeking, the chaos. Someone who finally had the room to breathe. The old identity, the one built on survival, on people-pleasing, on proving yourself to rooms that never deserved your effort, was never really you. It was armor. It was a version of you shaped by circumstances that no longer exist. And armor, however useful it once was, eventually becomes too heavy to carry. Maybe the person you thought you lost was never meant to return. Because here is the deeper truth underneath all 7 signs. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that could no longer carry you forward. That version did their job. They got you here. They survived what needed surviving, endured what needed enduring, and held on when holding on was the only option. But you don't need a survivor anymore. You need someone who can build. And that someone has been quietly stepping forward, sign by sign, choice by choice, boundary by boundary, this entire time. You're not becoming a stranger to yourself. You're finally becoming familiar with who you were always capable of being. So maybe this is why August 15th feels different this year. Not because of anything mystical happening in the sky, but because of everything that's been quietly happening in you. Think of this day as a symbolic checkpoint. Not a deadline, not a prophecy, just a moment on the calendar you get to use however you choose. A pause in the middle of an ordinary week to ask yourself the questions you've been too busy, too tired, or too afraid to sit with. What am I finally ready to release? What am I no longer willing to tolerate? What version of myself am I ready to leave behind? What would my life look like if I stopped living for other people's approval? What part of me deserves another chance? There's no universal, guaranteed answer waiting for you tomorrow. No promise that everything shifts the moment the clock strikes midnight. But there is this, a moment of honesty, right now, with yourself. And sometimes, that's where every real change actually begins. Not in the stars, in the decision. If this resonates with you, let August 15th be less about what happens to you and more about what you finally choose for yourself. Maybe the 7 signs were never about becoming someone completely different. Maybe they were about becoming more honest, more peaceful, more courageous, more selective, more self-aware, more you. Not a louder version, not a harder version, just a truer one, the one that was always in there, waiting for the noise to quiet down enough to be heard. Your awakening may not look like fireworks. It may look like silence, a boundary, a goodbye, a deep breath, a decision, a quiet morning when you realize you don't want your old life anymore. Not because your old life was worthless, but because you've outgrown the room it kept you in. And maybe that is how a new chapter really begins. If even one of these 7 signs felt like it was written about your life, you're not imagining it. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're simply becoming. If this resonated with you, type it in the comments. I choose the new me. Tell us which of the 7 signs hit the hardest. We read every single one. And if you want more honest, grounded conversations about personal growth, emotional healing, and the quiet process of becoming who you're meant to be, consider staying a while longer. There's more of this waiting for you. You already started the hardest part. You noticed. Now, keep going.